In Sports Show, we bring to you daily, weekly, and monthly different sporting activities in and around South Sudan. We are proud to be part of the sport update and history in your sporting life. In this show, we update the sport lovers on the progress of the sport in South Sudan, such as football, basketball, tennis, boxing, volleyballs, wrestling, and many more. Don't miss to follow us and join our group of sports analysts and experts as we bring them to you in this show through interviews and talk shows. Sport programs on SSBC. Welcome to the sport programs on SSBC, coming to you live from the national capital, Juba. My name is Majur Cholkor. This edition of the sport programs on SSBC, we take a look on Juba football stadiums. And to join me right here in the studio is Honorable Kwalwek Wall, and the Secretary, Ministry of Youth and Sport, and the chairpersons of the Investigation Committee, and Molana David Atem Ayuel, Legal Advisor, Office of the Vice President of Gender and Youth Cluster, and not forgetting Engineer Mayande Ngalir, Senior Consultant of Ministry of Youth and Senior Lecturer at the University of Juba. Dear viewers, thank you so much for joining us, and let's first have a break and find out what did the Ministry of Youth or the government of the Republic of South Sudan did about Juba Football Stadium. Let's have a break and we'll be right back. In the Sports Show, we bring to you daily, weekly, and monthly different sporting activities in and around South Sudan. We are proud to be part of the sport update and history in your sporting life. In this show, we update the sport lovers on the progress of the sport in South Sudan, such as football, basketball, tennis, boxing, volleyballs, wrestling, and many more. Don't miss to follow us and join our group of sports analysts and experts as we bring them to you in this show through interviews and talk shows. Sport programs on SSBC. Play like champion.
Renovation work at Juba Football Stadium resumes after the Minister of Youth and Sports suspended it on the 7th of October 2020. Minister Dr. Albino Boldiu announces the resumption of the work after he received the findings of the committee that he formed to find out the cause of the collapse of a section at the stadium.
I hereby direct the resumption of the construction processes with immediate effect. I would like to assure the people of South Sudan about the standard and safety of the stadium, because that was the question being raised by the media people, by social media, and that's why we have to stop the work, and we brought in the specialists who knows about the buildings to give us their words. So now the ministry, with a full mouth, we can announce to the people of South Sudan the standard and the safety of the stadium.
According to the report, the minister described the collapse of Section D at the VIP site of the stadium as a minor accident caused as a result of human error.
It was a minor accident caused as a result of human error. The committee further recommended a number of actions for my consideration as a minister, which include the contractor to take maximum precautionary measures to avoid the occurrence of such incidences. 3, the Ministry of Youth and Sport to have a clerk of work to be tasked with the supervision of this construction, and the contractor to use metal props instead of thick poles for the remaining part of the construction.
No casualties or injuries occurred as a result of the incident at the Juba Football Stadium. FIFA Forward program funds the renovation of the stadium, and as it is already behind schedule, the minister said by January next year the renovation would be complete. For SSBC, I'm Emmanuel Patrick, Juba Football.
In the Sports Show, we bring to you daily, weekly, and monthly different sporting activities in and around South Sudan. We are proud to be part of the sport update and history in your sporting life. In this show, we update the sport lovers on the progress of the sport in South Sudan, such as football, basketball, tennis, boxing, volleyballs, wrestlings, and many more. Don't miss to follow us and join our group of sports analysts and experts as we bring them to you in this show through interviews and talk shows. Sport programs on SSBC. Play like champion. Welcome back, dear viewers of SSBC, and thanks to my colleague Emmanuel Patrick for that report. This week, the debate is all about Juba Stadium. And my guest here in the studio will help us understand more about Juba Stadiums. During the collapse of one edge of the Juba Stadium, it generated a lot of debate among South Sudanese, especially the sport lovers in the country. And my guest right here in the studio will explain more about Juba Stadium progress. Gentlemen, allow me to say it, I'm profoundly honored and exceedingly humble having you in the studio of SSBC. You're most welcome to the sport programs.
Thank you, Major.
To begin with, the Undersecretary, and who is the chairperson of the investigation committee, before we look at Juba Stadium, Juba Football Stadium, as a matter of discussion for this show today, let's first understand the role of the Ministry of Youth and Sport in sport-related activities in the country. What is the role of the Ministry of Youth here?
Thank you, Major and my colleagues with me here. First of all, I would like to thank you, SSBC and the family, the entire family, for this opportunity. I would like to thank the viewers and the sport lovers for having been concerned about the Juba Stadium. The South Sudan Minister of Youth and Sports is one of the ministries that has been created by Revitalized Peace Agreement with the mandate of developing youth and sports in the country. That means he's in charge of the policies, he's in charge of the projects, in charge of capacity and development of talents of the youth across the board. So we have a constitutional mandate as a Minister of Youth and Sports to deliver services to the young people of South Sudan.
Looking at Juba Stadium, which is our topic of discussions today, when did Juba Stadium come into existence? For other sportsmen and women outside there who don't know about Juba Stadium, when was it established or given a name to be Juba Football Stadium?
Thank you. Juba National Stadium is one of the oldest stadiums in the country. It dates back to the dates of regional government in 70s. It was constructed after the Addis Ababa Agreement, and the first Addis Ababa Agreement's celebration was hosted at the Juba Stadium, and the chief guest by then was the Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie, and the president of the High Executive by then was Maulana His Excellency Abdul. That's the background of the Juba Stadium. Now, 2 years ago, our National South Sudan Football Association signed a contract with FIFA, that's the Federation of International Football Association, and it is a grant from FIFA to construct a modern sports facilities in the country. It was a property of the Juba Central Equatoria government, but they have signed an agreement for 20 years with South Sudan Football Association. As a result, now FIFA agreed to construct a facilities with a capacity of 70,000 people. It can host 7,000 people at a go. And that's the background of Juba National Stadium.
Thank you, Kwach Wek. And coming to Engineer Mayandeng Alier, who is a senior consultant of the Ministry of Youth. In the constructions of Juba Football Stadium or Juba National Football Stadiums, what has been your role or the role of the engineering team within the ministry and within the country to making sure that these constructions come to life?
Thank you so much, Major. First of all, I would like to bring forward the project itself. Initially, the stadium was 5,000 seater capacity, and FIFA decided to increase the capacity by 2,500. The stadium is divided into 5 parts. When FIFA came here, initially they met the Ministry of Youth and Sport through South Sudan Football Association. And if you understand, the Football Association is an autonomy from the ministry. They are independent. So issues to do with construction, initially I think we went overboard, and the ministry was not represented in terms of supervision. We do not have a resident engineer at the site.
Only the Central Equatoria.
So what happened was the South Sudan Football Association, the Central Equatoria, and the FIFA itself, who are resident engineers. So when this particular incident happened, we learned a lot of lessons from it. Part of it is for us to have a resident engineer or a clerk of work from the ministry. So before the incident on the 6th of this month, we did not have anyone who was playing an oversight at the stadium. But from now on, we shall have someone to do that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Let's Molana David Tatem. You are the legal advisor in the Office of the Vice President on Gender and Youth Cluster. Let's find out from you, what role is the Office of the Vice President on Gender and Youth Cluster doing in supporting the youth activities, especially in sport?
Thank you very much, Major, and thank you very much for having me here this evening. You know, as you may be aware, that the Vice President, Her Excellency Madam Rebecca Dimabur, is the one in charge of this cluster, which is comprising youth and sport, gender, child and social welfare, humanitarian, culture and heritage. So she is actually playing a role across the board. Like what happened at the collapse, when the Juba bridge collapsed, they quickly collaborated, with the Honorable Minister of Youth and Sport to put together a committee that will investigate. It was her concern because she wants to make sure that the bridge is built to the standard.
Stadium.
The stadium. The national stadium is built to the standard for this generation and the generation yet to be born. So it is her concern. And she is supporting the Ministry of Youth and Sport and all the cluster that is under her. Especially, if they, sometime, she went to the field on that particular day, that was on Saturday, to launch the work of the investigation team. And she made sure that the work start in earnest and that the committee do a thorough investigation to find out the causes.
Okay.
So she is playing a role.
Thank you. I will be back to you. Coming to Kwach Wek, you are the Under Secretary in the Ministry of Youth and Sport and the chairperson of the investigative committee. Let's look, before we go deeply about what it was the cause of the collapse of one side of the stadium, who decided the Juba National Stadium to be constructed? Who made the decision?
Thank you once again. I think when the new team for South Sudan Football Association came in, They negotiated with the FIFA, and FIFA actually award South Sudan as a country a grant to renovate and construct one of the stadium. And if you are very much aware that in the country there's no standard sport stadium. It is a prerogative of South Sudan Football Association as an independent sports organization in the country to negotiate on behalf of the country. So the role of the Minister of Youth and Sport is to actually green light the construction. But the technical aspect of it, the agreement and the project was actually between South Sudan Football Association and FIFA. So they put in place a committee for bidding. It was a joint committee, and the representative of the Minister of Youth and Sport was there in that committee to make sure that bidding was done according to international standard. But FIFA actually has the final saying in the project because they have the money, the grants, actually they release it to the contractor through South Sudan Football Association.
Mulana, engineer, to say it my end thing, let's look at the project itself. He said FIFA has a big role that it play when coming to the issues of bidding. Who are the main contractors here in this project?
Yeah, thank you so much, Major. First of all, the process of getting the contractor was done by FIFA, as was indicated by Honorable Undersecretary. And they are the one who got the contractor. The contractor in question is GS Construction, the company limited. They are the one constructing part of Tonj and Awi Road, and they have so many other projects that they are doing in the country. So the process of getting the contractor is purely the prerogative of FIFA. South Sudan has no interference in that process. What we wanted was just a facility to be constructed. So it is a design and build project.
As the engineer as a consultant engineer in the Ministry of Youth, were you people consulted?
Technically, the level of construction was at the level of administrative. It was administrative in nature. So maybe the people like the Undersecretary, the Minister at that time, they were the ones who were consulted. But the fact that we don't have a resident engineer with respect to this project, it shows that the technical expertise of the ministry in terms of engineering aspect was not brought into consideration. And fortunately enough, or unfortunately enough, at this juncture now, I think going forward, we shall have someone who will play an oversight and who will approve the completion of the stadium at the end of the day.
Talking about resident engineer, can you break it down in simple terms for a layman outside there to understand? What does it mean? You mean a South Sudanese who is an engineer, or what does it mean?
Well, a resident engineer is like a clerk of work, someone who has a technical expertise with respect to the project which is going on. In this case, someone who knows something about structural engineering, someone who knows something about civil engineering, someone who knows something about electrical engineering, any aspect of the construction project. That person is an eye and the ear of the ministry or whatever entity that sends him or her there. So that person plays a supervision role. She will write a report on a daily basis, on weekly basis, or on monthly basis. So the decision of the ministry, if we are to have someone there, will have been informed by the narrative given by that person. Likewise, the decision of South Sudan Football Association now is informed by the resident engineers who are always at the field.
Okay. Is this person supposed to be a South Sudanese or any person who is an engineer?
Well, the ministry, in this case, we have some engineers. And suppose we lack someone, which I don't think South Sudan has a lot of young men and women who have this kind of technical expertise. But if the ministry did not have someone we can hire a consultant to do that work for us. But good enough, we have thousands of people. If you call on, if you ask for people to apply today, you'll get over 2,000 people who can apply for that particular job.
Okay. Molana, we are talking about Juba Stadium. When you heard about the information of the collapse of the one site as the office of the Vice President, what was your take?
You know, our take has been, is also our concern, because Juba Stadium is a national concern and it's a national project. So when we heard that part of the section of the national stadium has collapsed, we reacted immediately. Her Excellency, the Vice President, collaborated with the Minister of Youth and Sport, and they put together a team that will investigate and find out what were the causes of the collapse. So is our concern.
Is the office of the Vice President having hand in supporting these constructions of the national stadium?
Not really, not a direct support. As you have heard from my colleagues, is a FIFA project, and FIFA is working closely with South Sudan Football Association. So it is their project, and the government has a role of overseeing what is going on, especially in terms of quality, the standard, to make sure that the life of young South Sudanese is not put at risk. Those who will be playing there, even when the completion is when it is done, people will be going there, including VIP. There is a part of VIP. I'm sure even His Excellency the President may be involved in the opening, and even people will be going there to watch. So it is the concern of the government, and especially the office of the Vice President for Youth and Gender Cluster, to make sure that the national stadium is built to the standard.
Okay. Honorable Kwachwek, let's talk about your finding.
Okay.
When you visited the site and you find that one side of the stadium collapsed, during the time you carried out your investigations, what are the findings? What did you get in place? What was the reason?
Thanks once again. I think the stadium actually collapsed on 6 October this month, and on 9th, Honorable Minister Dr. Albino Bol appointed an 11-person committee. We are only here 3, but 8 are not here because the studio cannot accommodate all of us. And on 9th, we started our work. Our time of reference was to identify the root causes of the collapse of the section of the stadium. 2 is to assess the extent of the damage. 3 is to recommend the action for the way forward. Immediately on 6, Honorable Minister of Youth and Sports issued an order to suspend the work of construction. So we actually designed our work. We came in on 9th or on 10th, and we start doing our work on the spot. We look at the physical structures, we look at the evidence, we look at the document, we interview the eyewitnesses, and we found out that the cost were 3 factors. One, what I could call a mechanical fault, because you have the machine that is involved in casting the work, and you have the human being operating the machine, you have the human being also directing the machine. So there were possibilities. I mean, the machine fault that caused the hitting of the framework, and then the framework was supported by props, supporting material. So it caused the collapse of the formwork. That was a mechanical fault. The machine, the palm machine, could actually it can stop because it is a machine that might have caused imbalance. The third one was an element of human error. because the distance between the machine and the third floor is more than 6 meters, you know. And the communication modes was bevel, you know. So you find a supervisor talking to a controller down there using signs. So all those factors cause the incidents. And there was no serious damage except some material loss and the time that is spent to suspend the work. But nobody was injured and nobody was affected in any way, whether psychologically or physically. Nobody died. Nothing was hurt, no car, no machine. There was no damage, you see. We recommended immediately, first of all, the contractor to start using the actually strong props, you know, the metals to support the framework. That's one. Number two, to use proper communication channel, so that when they are casting the work at a distance of 4 or 3 meters, then there's a proper communication. Three, we advise the contractor to use maximum supervision measures to make sure that it is the work is done. And as mentioned by my colleagues, Engineer Mayan, we are going to put an engineer, a team that will team up with the engineers from Juba State and an engineer from FIFA, from South Sudan Football Association, and an engineer from FIFA, so that they are a team to supervise. And then we have somebody to report to the ministry independently.
Okay.
Last, we actually recommend the resumption of immediate work so that they can start. And this is city was supposed to have finished by March if it were not because of COVID-19. So they are behind time frame. So we have a lot of recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear viewers from SLBC, for following these editions of the sport programs on SLBC, coming to you live from the national capital, Juba. My name is Majur Cholkor, and joining me in this edition is Honorable Kwach Wek-Wall, Under Secretary, Ministry of Youth and Sport, and the chairperson of the Investigation Committee for Juba National Stadium, and Molana David Atem Ayuel, legal advisor in the Office of the Vice President on Gender and Youth Cluster, and Engineer Mayan Deng Alier, Senior Consultant of the Ministry of Youth and Sport, and also Senior Lecturer at the University of Juba. They're helping us understanding the reason of why sections of the Juba National Stadium collapsed earlier this month. And coming back to the studio, I want to take Engineer Mayan on to what the Undersecretary and the Minister describe as human error. As an engineer, what is human error in engineering, and how common is supposed to be human error when you are given a national duty of constructing a big project like the National Stadium supposed to be?
Thank you, Major, once again. One thing, there's something that I need to correct before I go to the question. The part that collapsed is a small section of around 6.5 meters by 4 meters. And it was exaggerated by whoever took the photo on that particular day. So people have said that it is half of Juba Stadium that collapsed. No, it's just a small section. Now, with respect to the human error, you see, whenever you have such a magnificent, a big project like this, there are always two things. There's a machine and there's human. In this case, the machine was faulty and there was a mechanical problem. Also, the person who was operating, he might have slumber. Maybe he was tired, he was exhausted, and maybe because of the communication, as was mentioned by the Undersecretary, that he could not communicate properly with whoever was up there, and he's controlling the machine when he's on the ground, 6 meters below where the point which was being casted. So that element, when we talk of human error, it is an error which we cannot attribute to the machine which is being used, but to the person, the human being who is operating the machine. So if you make that mistake, then we attribute it as human error. If the machine is as a result of the machine, if the error is as a result of the machine, then we say that that is a mechanical or a machine error.
What was the reason that you find out from the human who created the error? What did he say, or what did they say?
Now, during our investigation, we had a chance to talk to almost 12 people whom we interviewed. We had asked to talk to the operator of that particular machine. Unfortunately, we found that he had already been suspended by the company. And when we requested for his contacts, they were not going through all of them. But we wanted to know from his point of view what was really the problem. But from those who are around, those who are operating, the foremen who are up and those who are down, what they told us is that the person who was in charge, he was supposed to cast two sections at the same time. The slab in question which collapsed and another slab. So that would reduce the length of the crane. So at that point, the crane, instead of it coming vertically from the top, it was horizontal, okay? And this machine, since it's pumping, it has an element of vibration. So whoever was holding this thing, plus the connection which was going on the ground, there was that poor coordination. And the chute of the pump fell on the formwork. And as a result, the formwork was overweight by the force of the shooter and by the weight of the concrete, and it collapsed.
Mulana David Atem, you are part of the investigation committee. What maybe some other finding that you may add, and the solution that was taken by you as members of the investigation committee?
Yeah, thank you. You know, some of the solution that I may, some things, the finding, you know what we did, we were looking also at the legal aspect, you know, me being a lawyer, we were looking at issues of insurance in case, you know, if somebody was to die, it was a serious accident and somebody was to die, who would have been responsible in terms of insurance. And we found out that there's an insurance company. It is already, you know, arranged by the contractor. So these were some of the aspects that we were also looking at. We were looking at the credibility of the company as well, the contracting company.
How credible are they?
In terms of whether they have the right legal documentations and what they have done before, whether they were involved in some mega construction elsewhere or in the country. These were some of the things that we looked at, and we found that they were okay.
So you mean all the documents provided by the company which is contracted were okay?
Were okay, because they went through the bidding process, and those people who were screening them looked at the legal aspect, and they looked at the capacity in terms of money who will pay, and it was the lowest bidder, and he had all the right documentation. So these were some of the things that we were looking at. But as to the recommendation and the solution to what should be done, most of them have been discussed by my colleagues.
As a legal advisor in the office of the Vice President, what did you advise Vice President to do in such scenarios?
Actually, we have advised that the decision that was taken was the right decision because it was timely. The committee was put together in very good time, and they did not actually take a lot of time. They were working overtime, you know, just some 3, 4, 5 days, and the report was complete. And so we recommended that in future, if there is any accident, the government should take very quick action.
Okay. Thank you so much, dear viewers on SABC, for following the sport programs coming to you live from the national capital, Juba. We are talking about Juba National Stadiums. Each collapse of the one sections of the stadiums and what is being done by the government to solve that problem. and what is going on in the term of development on the constructions of the National Stadium. Let's have a break and we'll be right back shortly. Stay with us. In the Sports Show, we bring to you daily, weekly, and monthly different sporting activities in and around South Sudan. We are proud to be part of the sport update and history in your sporting life. In this show, we update the sport lovers on the progress of the sport in South Sudan, such as football, basketball, tennis, boxing, volleyballs, wrestling, and many more. Don't miss to follow us and join our group of sports analysts and experts as we bring them to you in this show through interviews and talk shows. Sport programs on SSBC. Play like champion. Welcome back, dear viewers on SBC. You're still following the sport programs. Coming back to my guest right here in the studio, let's look at the cost of the constructions of the National Stadium, which is Juba National Stadium. Honorable Kwachwek, you can maybe let us know, most of the South Sudanese, especially the sport lovers, when the collapse of one side of the stadiums bring a lot of debate or generate debate among the sport lovers is because they believe this is a national stadium, and they are also concerned about how much is being spent on these national stadium construction.
Thank you. When the incidents happened, the first report that was digital was from a citizen, a good citizen of South Sudan. And I believe he or she was actually a sport lover. So I would like to thank the public, and the sport lovers for their concern, on the project. Because it is a national project, but the ownership are the people. So I want to thank whoever actually took that photo. Number two, there was a panic, As it was said, it was reported that the stadium collapsed completely, And then there were actually clips here and there, and there was no way of verifying. So my team actually did the work to verify what happened. And we have availed all the information. We have not hidden anything. Even the contractor has actually given us the first photo that was taken. Also, Honorable Minister went immediately. The same day, within 1 hour, he was there with the staff of SSFA and all, the sports lovers, And Vice President, Her Excellency Mamyane, also visited the scene. So I think what we want to assure the sport lovers and the citizens of South Sudan is that it was not, the whole project that collapsed. It was only one small section, 6 meters by about 2 meters, that collapsed.
Okay, Honorable, do you have an idea of how much is being spent on this construction?
Yes, when I went for investigations and we look at the actual document, the contracts, the drawing. The background actually that was given to us before we look at document by South Sudan Football Association, the first bidder gave actually a quotation, bill of quantity of 6 point something. But actually it was not taken, or that company was not taken. The second bidder was 5 million plus.
US dollars or euros?
US dollars, So it is a $5 million project. 5.5 million US dollars project. That's the size of the project. And the capacity is actually 7 million, 7,000 people at a go. So we are actually telling our public that there's no panic. And that collapse was actually mechanical and human error.
Okay.
It's going to be fixed, and nobody should worry. There's insurance in place. The city is insured, and when the government takes it over, the committee that's going actually to receive the committee, comprised of the government and SSFA, has to answer the questions: where will be the insurance issues will be. So it's going to be safe, and actually engineers, the team that will actually be there to make sure that the project is completed and is handed over, will rest assured, the government and us that the project is safe, the city is safe, technically.
Okay. Engineer, is this project involving some engineers from South Sudan? If not, is GS company, engineering company, a South Sudanese engineering company, or maybe from the neighboring countries?
Thank you so much. The project, the contractor is an Ethiopian, and the company is locally registered in South Sudan. Our supervisors from South Sudan Football Association, from Central Equatoria, they are all South Sudanese. Among the supervisors from FIFA, we have an engineer who is a South Sudanese. Such a project, you don't do the whole of it by yourself. What happens is that you subcontract, and most of the subcontractors are South Sudanese engineering firms, okay? So there's no way that you can find such a major project being done by foreigners, all of them, no. The ownership or the face value of the contracting company, it is an Ethiopian. But those who are doing the work on the ground, they are South Sudanese. The people we interviewed, only 2 of them were non-South Sudanese, and the rest were all locals. So the issue of who is handling this, or what kind of engineers are there, the nationalities, most of them are South Sudanese.
Do you think there is an impact in the projects that is being constructed by any engineers? For example, if these engineers are not South Sudanese, or if they are South Sudanese, do you think the issues of nationalities or where the engineers came from can have any impacts in the projects as an engineer?
No, you see, anyone who has gone to an engineering school, just like any other discipline, there are principles to be followed, okay? Wherever you are taught, as long as it is engineering, either you are taught in Chinese or you are taught in English or any other language, as long as you follow those principles, there is no way that you cannot communicate or you cannot interact with any engineering document that is provided to you, or any engineering work that is given to you. So it doesn't matter where you come from, or it doesn't matter if you're white or black, or even an American or an African. As long as you're an engineer and you're certified, then you can do any work that you can do anywhere in the world.
Okay. I will come to Mulana, but I want to take this question to Kwachwek. Most of South Sudanese are concerned about why most of the engineering activities or projects are given to the outsiders. Why? Is it because there are no qualified engineers in the country, as the Ministry of Youth and Sport is concerned?
Yeah, the questions of who is the contractor and who are the engineers is actually depends on the owner of the money. This Juba National Stadium is an international project. So the bidding was international, was advertised according to FIFA standard. So those contractors that applied are actually South Sudanese and non-South Sudanese. And the selection process, they have their own procedures and principles. So I think the committee that selected the contractor comprised of members from South Sudan Football Association, my predecessor, my former undersecretary, and a representative of Ministry of Labor, Minister of Land and Housing, National, and Central Equatorial Ministry of Land and Housing, and FIFA. So this was a committee that was handling the bidding. So team from South Sudan Football Association, I think they were hosted last week here, and they have actually answered that questions. So they are the right body to answer why the foreign company was selected. As it was put by Engineer Mayan, I think most of the engineers that are handling these projects, many of them are South Sudanese. Also, the bill of quantities and the standard, there's actually authentication by South Sudanese Bureau of Standard. So the materials, the construction materials, you know, the grapples, cement, and everything is being scrutinized by our own institution.
Thank you, Honorable. Time is again asked, and Molana, I will come to you as we are giving our last messages, but this is very last important question. How long is the stadium's construction going to take?
As I mentioned earlier, the document that we read supposed to have finished actually in August. But COVID-19 interrupted the logistics and the supplies of material, and even the team leader of FIFA actually was caught outside the country. The information that we got supposed to finish by the end of this year. So early next year, we are expected this project of Juba National Stadium to finish.
Okay.
So I want to rest assured that what we got from contractor and the FIFA representative and South Sudan Football Association team, they have promised us that it will finish the first quarter of 2021.
Thank you. Molana David James, anything that the Office of the Vice President on Gender and Youth Cluster is doing as sport activities is concerned, and your last message in 30 seconds?
Thank you very much. You know, Her Excellency, the Vice President, Rebecca, is very supportive of the youth generally, not only in terms of sporting activities, but generally, you know, he's supporting the private sector and is actually encouraging the youth to join the private sector, especially the entrepreneurs who should do small businesses instead of coming to the public sector. You know, public sector will not employ all of us. So I think our office is doing its best to support the youth across the country, and that's the message I want to give to our youth.
Thank you. Engineer, your last message as this construction of the national stadium is concerned to the sport lovers in the country.
One, I have to assure the people of South Sudan that the safety of the stadium in terms of the structural aspect is okay, and it meets the standard of any other stadium that you have seen in the world. So no one should be worried about what happened. Such kind of thing do happen of a bigger magnitude compared to what happened here. The second thing I can say is that we should make it a culture that whenever there's such an incident, whatever is going on has to be stopped, and an independent body comes in and investigate what happens. Three, I need to congratulate Dr. Albino for the bold decision that he took. You know, there's so many stakeholders in this thing, and he had a lot of pressure now to make the decision that he made. But despite that, he has made a decision that many people have not been making, and it is something that we should emulate, either in the road construction, or in terms of any other thing, an airplane collapse, and independent investigation has to be done. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Honorable Quach,
Yes.
your last message in 30 seconds.
First, I would like to thank Honorable Minister and Vice President Mama Nyandeng, who is heading our cluster of the youth and gender, and my team members that actually cooperated to produce the report within 5 days, and we made sure that we had sleepless days and nights. So I want to assure the sport lovers and the citizens of South Sudan that the stadium is safe. And as of today, we are going to put in place our own supervisor that will team up with the team that is there we make sure that we have weekly report and monthly reports. So whatever incidents happen, God forbid, we will be actually briefing the public immediately, and we will make it actually a program to make sure that the public is actually oriented.
Thank you.
And is briefed ever then and now about the progress of Juba National Stadium. Thank you, SSBC, and then the team behind your work. We appreciate and we thank you all for this opportunity.
Thank you. And back to you, dear viewer. Thank you so much for joining us. These editions of the sport program on SSBC has been looking at the national stadiums. And my guests were Maulana David Atem Ayuel, Legal Advisor, Office of the Vice President on Gender and Youth Cluster, Engineer Mayan Deng Alier, Senior Consultant of the Ministry of Youth and Sports, and also a Senior Lecturer at the University of Juba, and Honorable Kwachwek Wall, Under Secretary, Ministry of Youth and Sport, and the Chairperson of the Investigation Committee on Juba National Stadium. For me, Majur Cholkur, and the crew in the studio, we do say thank you so much for accompanying us, and stay tuned for more programs coming up.
Thank you.
In Sports Show, we bring to you daily, weekly, and monthly different sporting activities in and around South Sudan. We are proud to be part of the sport update and history in your sporting life. In this show, we update the sport lovers on the progress of the sport in South Sudan, such as football, basketball, tennis, boxing, volleyballs, wrestlings, and many more. Don't miss to follow us and join our group of sports analysts and experts as we bring them to you in this show through interviews and talk shows. Sport programs on SSBC. Play like champion.